Technically, true barbecue means very slow cooking over wood smoke. I know. I'm not claiming this is authentic barbecue, despite the fact that it has actually won awards in barbecue contests, and it violates several very serious rules of barbecue. I know, but just forget everything you were told and try this. Trust me.
I'm going to begin with a full teaspoon of black peppercorns. I'm going to use a tablespoon of muscovado, very dark brown sugar. I'm putting it in the grinder because this stuff tends to clump up, and it's very difficult to break up otherwise. And I'm using half a teaspoon of ajwain. This is a spice in India that's often confused with thyme. This is an important ingredient, but if you can't get it, then substitute twice that amount of thyme. And of course, now in order to mix this up, I'm just going to scrape this out into a glass jar. Add a teaspoon of regular paprika, a little bit more than a teaspoon. This is Spanish smoked paprika. I'm using the bittersweet one. You can use the other one, dulce, if you want. This is 2 teaspoons of coarse salt, and I'm also going to add to this about a teaspoon of ground cumin, a little bit on the generous side of all these. Yeah, we're going to shake it up. I've got the baby back ribs here, and they have this membrane that runs along here. Everybody who makes ribs knows the importance of removing this. You actually do not have to. It's not absolutely required, because by the time you're done with this, there'll be this membrane will fall off anyway, but you'll get a lot better flavor if you can get rid of this before you season them, and then that way the seasoning can get into all this meat, because this tissue is completely blocking. Let me pull it back here so you can see. This tissue is not going to melt down, and it's blocking access to all this meat between the ribs. So you got to take a knife and go through all this. Sometimes you're going to have extreme difficulty getting this off completely, and all you can do really is peel it away as best you can, scrape it off as best you can, and make sure that you get access to the meat underneath here. That's the important part. Having completed that, I've got the ribs laid out in a storage container. I'm going to use the entire spice mix here. That's a lot of spice. That's okay. We want these strongly seasoned, and on both sides, of course. We're gonna massage this around completely on both sides. This is enough for 1 kilogram. The spice mix is enough for 1 kilogram of ribs, or just over 2 pounds, but 2 1/4 pounds. And after this is massaged in, you can see this is exactly the right amount of spice to be soaked up by all these ribs. There's nothing extra. It's all on the ribs. That's great. Now we're going to put a lid on this and refrigerate it overnight. It's the next morning. I've got about 90 grams of carrot, 90 grams of onion, whole head of garlic, the red chili pepper, and here's a pork from the night before. It's been sitting in the refrigerator. Now we're going to cut this up and begin lining the pressure cooker. Here we have the bottom of the pressure cooker. I'm going to put the onions, carrots, chilies. I get rid of the stem and just cut it up. They don't have to be any particular order, of course. I'm just using this for some aromatics, and also to hold the meat up off the bottom where it's going to be too hot. The meat will burn. And then I've got the garlic that you don't have to peel it in this case. I'm just using like this, and I'm going to put it face up. But I don't know. It's probably a superstition that this will make the flavor better. But I don't know. That's what I'm doing. Okay, the ribs go in. If they overlap a little bit, it really doesn't matter. I used to try to make sure that I would have a big enough pressure cooker in here that there would be absolutely no overlap. But I found over the years that when they do overlap, the part that overlaps is cooked just fine anyway. But nevertheless, I'm gonna try to make sure there's not too much overlap. Got a lot of surface here. This is just about right. Now I'm gonna add the wine. And this is the box from where the ribs were stored overnight. And this is the way I'm going to add the wine. I'm going to use it to rinse out this box, pick up anything else that was left in it, and then pour it on into the ribs. And begin heating this. Get it to a boil first before, or start to simmer at least before I put the lid on it. You see getting some bubbles coming in, so I'm going to put the lid down and clamp it. It's been 30 minutes. It has heated now to where it's just got up to pressure. You can tell when you release it a little bit, you can hear it's hissing. That's what you want. You want to heat it slowly originally. Don't just crank the heat up and have it to go to a rolling boil right away. That won't be good. So now I'm going to start counting the time that it's actually in there under pressure, which is going to be about another, somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour. In this case, I'm going to go 45 minutes because those ribs are pretty thin. So it's been in half an hour now, 45 minutes more, grand total of an hour and 15 minutes, but on a low heat. I'm actually reducing it down from 3 to 2 now, so it's only on a heat of 2. Just pressure is doing the work. Okay, the time is up. I'm going to move it off the heat and let it begin to cool down. We're not going to release the pressure though, like so many people do with a pressure cooker. Just let it cool down off the heat and let the pressure equalize on its own. So now, after it's cooled, I'm going to open this up, carefully remove the ribs to a point. Then once that's done, we strain off all the liquid from this. We're going to press this down a little bit and refrigerate the broth that's underneath it in a container. And the platter of ribs, after it cools down just a little bit more, gets wrapped up in plastic and put in the refrigerator to chill these down. Now, after a few hours in the refrigerator, the fat on this solidifies into a sheet. Now, you can save this. There's actually some applications you can use this pork fat for, but that's really another topic. We're not going to get into that. What you want to do with these ribs is you want to get rid of most of this fat. Just pull it off with a spoon and discard it, or put it in a bottle, use it for something else. In a restaurant, I can tell you we do not throw this away. This is a valuable commodity, and we use it for making things like rice. Your rice has a lot of pork fat in it in a lot of restaurants. That's what gives it flavor. But we don't want it in the sauce. At least we don't want very much of it. If you've got a few threads left, that's okay. You don't have to be anal about it. So what I did here is I put this on a scale, and I put the cleared liquid, or mostly cleared liquid, you can see there's a couple spots of fat, into this pan, and I weighed it. Now I've got about 450 grams. If you have really a little bit, you've got problems. You did something really wrong. But you should have somewhere in this vicinity, somewhere around 400. That's a good sign. You want to make sure that it's somewhere around there before you proceed. I'm going to reset the scale, and I'm going to add the ketchup. Here, 500 grams. Then we're going to add the sugar. Okay. And the cider vinegar. And the red wine vinegar. I'm actually using a Russian grape vinegar here that's fruitier than typical red wine vinegars. This is actually an improvement if you can find it, but I know this is very hard to find in the United States. Okay, move this over the stove, start heating it up. I'm going to add about a teaspoon of mustard to it, just a little bit of prepared mustard just for zing. I'm going to bring this to a simmer. We're going to start reducing it to get it thick. This is the amount of heat that we want to see. We want to see bubbles breaking from the surface, but we don't want to see it at a rolling boil. And this is going to take a while to reduce. Just how thick we reduce this to, you'll have to wait and see. And here's what it looks like after about 45 minutes. You can see it's starting to thicken up. And there's solid starting to form on the bottom, but it's not quite there yet. It needs to be just a little bit thicker. So I'm going to turn the heat down more to turning heat down to 2 now. We want to really slow it down in the last part of the evaporation so that it doesn't burn at all, and so that it thickens up nicely without any sort of overtones of charcoal. And finally, when you see this thick, glossy, very dark sauce, this is it. It's done. This is the stage you want. It might take you a little bit of practice to find this stage. This is what you want to get it to. Now, you can add a little bit of liquid smoke to this after it cools off. That will give it the final professional barbecue sauce. In the end, this is the amount. There's not really very much, considering the amount of wine and ribs and everything, vegetables and everything else that went into it. This is the final product for the amount of sauce, but it is absolutely insanely delicious. It is better than anything you will ever buy at any price. And of course, what would you have to charge somebody for this? If you were going to make this and sell it, you'd have to charge $50 a bottle for this to make a profit on it. I have a stovetop smoker here. I'm going to put in a little bit of hickory. Not too much, because you don't overpower these. The hickory is very strong wood, and a little bit of Russian birch. Of course, you can use whatever wood you like, just slightly different flavors. And then we'll assemble the rest of the smoker. Now I've got this ribs that I covered with plastic. They've firmed up in the refrigerator. This is a pretty small smoker, so I can't get all of them in at one time. And I also recommend that you do not stack them on top of each other. Keep them in a single layer like this. This will give you the best coverage. And for this amount, this tiny smoker, I'm going to have to do them in 2 batches. But this is where they begin. And just follow directions for your smoker. So once the first wisps of smoke come out of this, you're going to close it up. But yeah, that's the standard directions for any stovetop smoker. And then at that point, then you begin to count. Okay, I see some smoke coming out. I'm going to close this down. I'm going to reduce the heat on the smoker down to about 5, and I'm going to begin the time. It's been about 7 minutes now. I can touch the top of this. I can feel it's very hot, so I know that the ribs are going to be hot in there. I'm going to kill the heat completely. There's still a little bit of smoke coming around the edges. That's fine. That will continue to smoke the ribs. They're going to be really hot and smoky when we're done. We're going to just let it sit like this on the burner for 3 more minutes. And the time is up. Comes off, smokes right there. Sauce on them. Brush to help spread it out. And of course, transfer this to another plate to clean it up a little bit so that you don't have splatters all over your plate. And you got enough sauce here. You can serve a little bit more on the side if you want to. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.